I didn't walk into that job thinking I needed to prove anything. I wasn't looking for a fight, or a cause, or a story worth telling. I just needed steady work, a paycheck that cleared, a shift schedule that didn't change every week, and maybe a place that didn't treat me like I was temporary. My name is Danielle Rhodes, 32 years old, Sacramento born and raised. I had spent the previous year bouncing between temp agencies, night shifts, and an unemployment line I didn't ever want to see again. So when Gavin Steel Manufacturing called me back after a rushed interview with HR, I took it as a blessing. The pay wasn't great, but it was better than the nothing I'd been surviving on. And honestly, I just wanted stability. I remember parking my beat-up Honda the first morning, watching all the men in oil-stained work pants walk toward the warehouse. I told myself, you've worked harder places. You can handle this. And it was true, I'd handled a lot. But the thing no one warns you about is the weight of walking into a place where you're already the outsider before anyone knows your name. When I walked into Gavin Steel on day one, it smelled like burnt metal and old sweat. Forklifts beeped in every direction, the kind of noise that vibrates in your ribs. A shift supervisor, Tom Rudd, met me by the time clock. Stocky guy, thick mustache, eyes that scanned you like he was checking for defects. "You're Danielle?" he said, no greeting, no handshake. "Yes sir. Locker 14. Hope you brought a thick skin." He walked away before I could answer. I figured it was sarcasm. I didn't realize until later that it was a warning. I hadn't even reached my station before the first comment came, from behind me, not loud, but loud enough. "Look at that, plantation audition must be today." The guys around him laughed like it was regular, like it was lunchtime banter. I stopped walking for half a second. My mind did that thing where it tries to decide whether to react or survive. I kept moving. I had bills waiting at home. I wasn't losing a job on day one over somebody else's ignorance. But that was the moment I understood what kind of place I'd walked into. By lunch break on day one, I'd already been called "sister girl," makes the place look diverse, and a good hire for HR statistics. None of it was said with malice big enough to fight back against, but small enough to sink in, grain by grain. It was death by 1,000 stereotypes. No one stopped it. No one acknowledged it. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing that the silence was the culture. When my shift ended, I sat in my car with my hands on the steering wheel, listening to the engine tick. I knew I could quit. I knew walking away would be easier. But something in me said no. Not because I wanted to be a hero. But because I was tired of running, tired of quietly enduring, tired of being grateful for scraps. So I opened my phone and started typing. Day 1, comment, plantation audition. Supervisors present. No response. I didn't know what that note would become. But I knew it was the first one. Over the next week, I wrote down everything, every slur, every joke, every look. Not because I was trying to build a case. Because writing it down made me feel sane, like the problem wasn't in my head. But then came the wall. There was a concrete wall near the break room where employees posted drawings and inside jokes. That morning, someone had drawn a stick figure hanging from a tree. Underneath. "Keep the girl in line." I stared at it for maybe a minute, not frozen, just stunned. It was the kind of thing you think only exists in movies or history books. Not in 2025. Not in a warehouse 20 minutes from downtown Sacramento. I took a photo. Then I walked to HR. The woman who interviewed me didn't even look up from her computer. Was it physical contact? No. Then it'll be noted, but there's not much we can do unless it escalates. Escalates. A lynching drawing, apparently, didn't count. That night, I saved every screenshot, every note, every photo into a password-protected folder on my laptop. I named it. If something happens to me. It sounds dramatic, I know. But that's where my mind was at, not because I thought someone would hurt me physically, but because I knew how easily workplaces can twist a narrative. I didn't want to disappear quietly. The retaliation didn't look like shouting or threats. It looked like a schedule change. It looked like suddenly being reassigned to Station 12, the hottest, loudest, most malfunction-prone corner of the plant, the station everyone avoided. It looked like being given double the cleaning tasks, while other workers leaned against the wall on their phones. It looked like my lunch being mysteriously cut to 18 minutes instead of 30. It looked like no one, not even Deshaun, the forklift guy who had once warned me, making eye contact anymore. Retaliation doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just erases you. But I kept showing up. I kept working. And I kept writing everything down. After 2 weeks, I had 47 separate incidents documented: harassment, retaliation, manipulation, sudden write-ups that contradicted my previous evaluations. And it was clear, they weren't trying to fire me. They were trying to make me quit. So I bought something small, a pen. Not just any pen. One of those discreet recording pens, camera the size of an eyelash. That pen changed everything. The next time a supervisor muttered, "Would have been easier if you kept your mouth shut," I caught it. The next time someone joked that HR was turning into a diversity daycare, I caught it. The next time Tom Rudd assigned me a 92-pound lift alone while 3 others watched, I caught it. And when a coworker, Lucia, quietly slipped me a sticky note saying, "They want you gone. Don't let them." I took a picture of that too. It wasn't anger driving me at that point, it was clarity. I was building a map of their behavior. A map they didn't know I had. When I finally called a workplace discrimination hotline, the woman on the phone listened quietly and then said, "You're not imagining it. You're facing a hostile work environment. And you have grounds for action." That wasn't courage. That was confirmation. She gave me a list of attorneys. I picked the one whose website didn't have stock photos. Her name was Attorney Olivia Grant, calm, precise, not impressed by anything. During our first call, she said, "Do you want a quiet settlement or are you ready for them to know your name?" I didn't even hesitate. "I want them to stop doing this to people." She said, "Then we don't settle quietly." And with that, the lawsuit was filed. I didn't feel brave. I felt balanced. Like after weeks of absorbing everything, the weight was finally shifting back to where it belonged. The company's reaction was predictable. First came the denials. Then the PR spin. Then the fake write-ups they tried to stack in my file. I walked into HR one morning to find a folder claiming I'd been late 6 times, even though my badge scans proved otherwise. They counted on me not knowing my rights. They counted on fear. But fear wasn't driving me anymore. Documentation was. I pulled out my own folder. Thick. Organized. Time-stamped. Videoed. I placed it on the table. The HR manager's face fell. She excused herself to double-check a few things. They weren't expecting someone who did her homework. They definitely weren't expecting someone who understood patterns, timelines, and liability better than they did. After the lawsuit became public record, something shifted. A few employees who'd stayed silent, like Lucia, like a younger guy named Devin, quietly contacted my attorney, saying they'd witnessed things too but had been scared to speak. A local labor rights blog picked up the story. No names. No specifics. Just patterns. Patterns that looked suspiciously like Gavin Steele. The factory panicked enough to hire a crisis manager, a man who showed up at my door late at night with a draft settlement and a note that said, "Be careful. Some stories are safer left quiet." I emailed the entire thing to Olivia. Her response was simple. "That's intimidation." Good. They're losing. By the time mediations rolled around, the company had lawyers flanking every side of the table. They offered a six-figure settlement. Big number. Life-changing number. But tied to it was a gag order. My story would disappear. Their behavior would too. Olivia looked at me. She didn't pressure me either way. She just asked one question. What do you want your son, or your future self, to think when you remember this? I thought about the woman at the break room who pretended not to hear the jokes. I thought about the man who whispered slurs. I thought about the little cartoon on the wall, the stick figure hanging from a tree. And how no one thought it mattered. So I said. I want my voice. They can keep the rest. The room went still. Then the company's lawyer asked, what will it take for you to sign? I answered, remove the gag order. I speak once. On my terms. He stared at me like I was insane. But here's the thing about leverage. Once you have it, you don't need to scream. You just need to stand. And they agreed, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. A week later, the settlement was finalized. No NDA. No silence. They paid, and I kept my voice. Epilogue, what changes, what doesn't? I didn't go back to Gavin Steele. I didn't need to. And they didn't fire anyone publicly, companies rarely do. But policies changed quietly. Anti-harassment trainings rolled out. Supervisors shifted. HR reorganized. Word traveled. Lucia got promoted. Devin transferred out. A few older supervisors retired early. And I started consulting for a nonprofit that protects whistleblowers. Not because I wanted a crusade. But because surviving that place made me realize how many people stay quiet because they think they're alone. I wasn't special. I wasn't fearless. I was just tired of silence. Sometimes that's enough. And maybe that's why I'm sharing this now, not to be inspiring, not to be brave, but because someone watching this is standing in a factory, or an office, or a restaurant right now, swallowing mistreatment because it feels safer than naming it. Maybe this is the push they need. So here's what I want to know, honestly. Have you ever stayed quiet at a job because speaking up felt dangerous? Do you think I made the right choice rejecting the silence they offered, or would you have taken the settlement and walked away? There's no judgment. Just a conversation we should have been having a long time ago. Because the more we talk about it, the harder it becomes for places like Gavin Steele to pretend they don't hear us.